Okay, welcome to hell, boys and girls. This is the skinny lowdown on China. The boom and bust of the capitalist system is almost a forgotten cliche in this world of increasing technology. People forget Marx was an historian, but his expertise was pretty much limited by his Germanic origins, as he, like Freud and Nietzsche, was writing in a pre-Nazi Germany. But China's history is 5,000 years old, and that is written history. The so-called Cultural Revolution was, in actuality, a savage purge of intellectuals, a widespread book burning. The Chinese universities were shut down for 10 years. In the 1950s and 60s, it was common to hear of Chinese starving to death. By the late 1970s, however, China was feeding itself, having mobilized the populace, the farming, and food prices were fixed so that, for example, a bushel of corn was 10 cents. After Nixon opened up trade with China in 1972, Walmart eventually built over 4,000 factories in China. Out of its 9,500 factories, I think 4,500 were in China. But Walmart paid slave wages in China. This is page 2 of the skinny on China. Walmart was paying 25 to 30 cents an hour in China to jobless Chinese. And that was better than nothing. Like Marx said, the capitalist takes the worker down to the factory gates and says, "Behold the teeming masses. You're going to work for $1 a day, aren't you?" With inflation, that dollar is now $2, but a U.S. dollar is only worth about 10 cents at best, and a penny or two at worst. So $100 only worth $1 in 1906 money, when you could eat all day on 10 cents. Try that nowadays. You can't eat breakfast at McDonald's for less than $10, basically. So a dollar in 1906 money is only worth about a penny today. And Marx was writing in the 1840s in China and Germany. So China had around 1 billion people in 1975. Now has 1.5 billion. India had 750 million. Now has 1 billion. India is a different story, by the way. Basically, the British stole all of the gold and ivory and left it an impoverished nation, but it has nationalized 75% of its banks, which seems a good idea if you're trying to cash a check. China has repression of women and minorities. Women are not a minority, but can only have one child per family. The population is abysmally ignorant of what's going on in the rest of the world, even in its own country. Abortions are enforced. And they're in the news, by the way, with this blind lawyer case the U.S. has flubbed up recently. You cannot even find some of Lao Tzu's books or Marx's early humanistic writings in China. So who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Why are we afraid of China? In 1993, we were buying about $80 billion worth of junk from China, mostly handmade or hand-painted Christmas decorations, which no one in the U.S. could duplicate for so cheap. Last year in the U.S., we bought over $300 billion worth of stuff from China, mostly cheap electronics. All the cell phones and iPods are made over there. I think maybe Apple's making something there. I hear they're not making a lot and stuff here. And since the Reagan years, we've even been taking U.S. Social Security taxes, converting them to IOUs, putting them in the General Treasury, and by way of Treasury bills, using Social Security and Medicare monies to finance the biggest military build-up peacetime during the Reagan years in world history, and finance our endless wars in Iraq and Afghanistan while selling T-bills and bonds to the Japanese and the Chinese, so that we now owe them 80% of our national debt. China is taking water from feeder streams in the Great Lakes and shipping it in these giant tanks overseas to fill up their aquifers, while we're left to recycle sewer water, according to Jesse Ventura, excuse me. Apologies to Jackson. Theoretically, China could call in its debt, and we'd have to we'd have to sell assets and pay it off. But we can't do that. We can pay the interest, but we can't pay the principal. Meanwhile, China's mining gold, has almost all the world's lithium and rare metals, except for, I think, Greenland or somewhere, is growing at 14% a year, and which is versus our 0.5% growth rate in GNP. We owe more in national debt than we produce in a year. Meanwhile, we spend $1 trillion a year on our 900 military bases. We have 47 bases just surrounding Iran, which is not building, contrary to Israel's bullshit, any nuclear weapons, and has no intentions of doing so. Obama recently put 2,500 Marines in Australia to protect us from the Chinese. We want to build an empire. $1 trillion equals the annual total IRS income in the U.S. So we are borrowing from the Chinese to run our country. Why not sell them those bases and pay off our debts? The Bible says, resist not evil, love your enemies. The Chinese sages like Lao Tzu say, yield and overcome. We don't have this money to pay the principal on our IOUs, and all we can pay is the interest. Bush Jr. and Sr. spent all of the Social Security and Medicare income for the next 10 years on their wars, and China is going to surpass us in a year or two in GDP. So that's page 4. The perfect storm. China passes U.S. According to the Wisdom Group, after analyzing thousands of economic cycles for the last 3,000 years, a perfect economic storm is coming, which will cause a massive shift in wealth and power from the U.S. and U.K. to China and the Orient. If you add China's population to India's, you get 2.5 billion people. And you add in Singapore, Thailand, Burma, and Japan, you get about 3.2 billion people, which is half of the Earth's population. The U.S. meanwhile would have a zero population growth if it were not for the Hispanic community. In any case, wealthy families in the U.S. will become poor, and poor families in China will become rich. Some say China has already passed us. Donald Trump says they're eating our lunch. I don't see how Trump can compete with cheap labor. So that's Trump's problem.